Hey everyone, welcome to Jewish Wisdom for Coping with the Pandemic. Nope, that was our old name. It's the American Mussar weekly community gathering. We've just been talking before the recording started about just a horrible situation in LA, and my heart is really heavy with everything that's going on there. And there are people here who are very, very directly impacted by the fires. And so I think my mind went back to the old COVID COVID emergency meeting which is where we started almost 5 years ago. So it was 5 years ago in March. So it is just incredible to be a part of this community. And not all of us have been here that long, and people have come and gone, but it's really uh, been very meaningful for a lot of us. So we'll begin the way that we always do, with a short meditation to create a sacred space and a safe space. So please relax and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling and exhaling, if thoughts should come into your mind, just observe them and let them go, like watching a car move past on the highway. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all we need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hi, Marjorie, welcome. I saw you arrive just as we were heading into our meditation. And I don't know if I said hi to Martin and Haya, but welcome to both of you as well. So we began this a little bit before the recording. But what I wanted to do is just to make some space for us to. I'm in California. I went to school in LA. I'm feeling deeply impacted by this. The Pasadena Jewish community, Pasadena Temple, Jewish Temple and Community Center burned down, where a very good friend of mine works as a rabbi, and her family is a member there. Other people on this call are living in LA. So I want to, in this time of self-reflection, when we're working on Hitlamdut, self-reflective learning, just want to make space for what we may be processing. And as Alan Moranis, the Mussar author, teaches, it's all grist for the Mussar mill. So we may have something we want to say, we may not, we may have already covered it, but I just wanted to leave a little space for us to process together, and maybe to give some Mussar context. Yes, Nancy.
Rick, my phone's going off because we just got in another alert. But I missed what you said. Did you say that your friend's temple in Pasadena?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because the temple in Pacific Palisades, I don't know if you know, is gone.
I know. I did not, I knew that there were a lot of people worried about it, but they just couldn't get close enough to it. Yeah.
Yeah, because the Methodist church I worked at is gone. And yeah.
No, this is something which has impacted people from many religions, many economic classes, just across a whole swath of people in one of the largest cities in the country and in the world. So this is,
Yeah, I think the house that we had our reception is gone. Yeah, it was at the top of the hills. Yeah.
it's terrible. Martin.
Yeah, as something that's on the news yesterday about the fire. What upset me was it upset me what was said. It happened to be Trump who said it, but what it upset me was what he said, not who he is. He says, "Well, Newton, the governor of California, chose to save birds rather than clear the forest." I mean, here's a federal person, the most unhelpful situation, non-empathetic. That's pretty upsetting. I was upset just to hear a national leader respond like that. I mean, just talk about chesed and
Yeah.
oh my God, just um, our federal leader, incredible. Anyway, that was very upsetting hearing that. Okay.
Yeah, Nancy.
If you've watched the news, you might have heard that some other people have said that they're blaming Karen Bass because the vegetation was not cleared out, which, whose responsibility is that for all those canyons? Because it went all the way to Malibu and then all the way to Brentwood. And then the other is that whose responsibility is it really to monitor all of the fire hydrants because those did not have adequate water or pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's really sad to hear, people blaming people in a time of us coming together as one and pouring out the love to the firefighters and all those, even the civilians that are going around from home to home with buckets of water from their house to try to put out their neighbors' fires.
yeah. It can be certainly hard to hear those things, and in our national context, where this sort of thing goes on, it makes it harder to deal with this. I'm hearing you. What else? What else is up for people? Does anyone else have anything they're noticing or noticing within that they would like to share? Yeah, Marjorie.
Am I unmuted?
You are now, yes.
Thank you. Um, what I go to with every natural disaster, when I think about the fire in Hawaii, they blame that on, a human error. Building, I just was in touch with my first cousin who lives in LA. She's actually in San Diego, but she grew up in the LA area, and she said a lot of her friends in Malibu, they've rebuilt 3 times. So what that brings me to is that there's something much, much greater than the human condition. Um, and then unfortunately, people tend to overlook what's going to happen. I remember when there were always mudslides, and homes were like coming down these hills. You build on the edge of a hill. What do you think is going to happen? People tend to overlook this. So I think that it's um it's bigger than I don't even have the language, I don't think, for how much bigger this is than a human than person. I just feel terrible. My niece had to evacuate. She's in Pasadena. Thank God that they, had the foresight to just get in the car and leave.
Mhm.
So the good thing is more people are able to evacuate, and hopefully they'll come back to and be able to rebuild. And I just think about also New Orleans. There's so many natural disasters that I think we need to reprioritize. But I should say, I would like to see people reprioritize. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. And I'm beyond prayers. I would just hope I can do something physically from Minnesota to help people on the West Coast or wherever the disaster is taking place.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Torah scrolls, where I read that about the Torah scrolls, Baruch Hashem. That's
Yeah, I
all.
like the way you sort of brought it into kind of your reactions and feelings, because again, remember, as we're part of our Mussar journey, it's like where is this, what can we learn from this situation? I'm reminded of something I know some of you or many of you have read, This Is Real and You're Completely Unprepared by Rabbi Ellen Liu. And he talked about, in times of a natural disaster, people, or when things happen, people look for like either someone to blame or some explanation. And having someone to blame or an explanation, it gives us some control over something that may be uncontrolled. And he said that in Israel, every year around Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of the destruction of the temple, they say, well, why was the temple destroyed? And there's an argument in the Talmud, some rabbis say it was because of baseless hatred between the Jewish people. And some say it was because the zealots wouldn't surrender or they wouldn't, do this or that. And they were, uh, too extreme. And then there's a history professor, and they said, why did it get destroyed? Because the Roman Empire was unstoppable. That, there is, there's something bigger that's going on here. Bonnie, I saw your hand, and I think Wendy, I saw your hand at one point too. Did you still want to comment or?
Well, I think that there are a lot of nonprofits. The Jewish Federation, the national organization, JFNA, Jewish Federation of North America, is setting up their disaster relief. I got one from the conservative movement yesterday morning. I serve on the national board, but it went out to all the synagogues in the conservative movement that they had set it up. And so there are ways that people can donate, whatever level they're able to donate. This is not something that's going to go away in a week or a month, or it's going to take years to rebuild, and people are going to need a lot of services and support. On the other side of it, and it's maybe because we're in Northern California, is that the 1989 earthquake, which occurred at 5:04. I was head of school of the Jewish day school, and we had been preparing for an earthquake. We didn't do just fire drills; we did duck and cover, and evacuate. It made a difference in terms of the kids were home, and the parents let me know that they knew what to do. But this time, this fire said to me, you know what? Your earthquake kit in the garage is 10 years old. You're not gonna want to eat that food. It's probably terrible. So if we feel frustrated and we're in a situation or in a community where something could happen, maybe we can just take care of ourselves by making sure that we have a plan and we have the appropriate material, food, whatever we need to have. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Wendy and then Toby.
Well, we have friends and they have homes in Pacific Palisades. They're both evacuated. I'm pretty sure they're going to be gone. The homes are going to be gone. I'm so glad that so many people got out. Um, they I can't reach them, but my husband's sister talked to them that they are safe. But and some of them have kids. But as far as the blame thing goes, it's really interesting because when someone dies, like when you lose a child, a lot of people just they go to look for the blame. It's almost as if they're saying, "What did I do? Did I do?" It's kind of a self-centered response to place blame right away like that. But then on the other hand, if you're someone who people look to for an answer, and you're just looking at the actual details of the disaster, and you're not really thinking about the people, and you're responding to this happened because of this, it's almost like it relieves the people that are placing the blame because they don't want to be blamed. And it's like, oh, good, it wasn't my fault. It's probably not very great to respond that way, but I can't understand it because I know a lot of people blamed my husband and I when our son died. And they even said it. And it was like shocking, rather shocking. But then they went off and they could feel better about themselves because, well, that might not be the best of the human condition, but it does exist. And so later on, I'm sure that all of our scientists, and I'm sure we'll want analysis. And the reason we'll do that then is so we can prevent it in the future. But right now, when it's so raw, it's kind of mean to state a blame, I think. But then I have to just try to understand them that they're just trying to help people see that it wasn't their fault or something. I don't know. That blame thing is a very thing that bothers me a lot in any circumstance, really.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I'm listening with an open heart, and I'm sort of shocking and disappointing to hear that someone was so insensitive to say that to you and your husband. So sorry that happened on top of everything you were going through. Martin.
Yeah, Marjorie made a good point or a valid point about the logic of do you build on the side of a cliff or do you build in a fire situation? That's just a good logical point of the problem. But going back to what Wendy's talking about more of the empathetic response, my comment, it seems like with all the blame about so many things in the world these days, that it seems maybe we're recognizing a national lack of empathy cultural issue from the United States. I hear it so much about leaderships putting blame. And one example I gave for Trump, for example, I mean, this is a natural cultural, maybe it's a cultural issue that this country is having. Yeah. And so if that's true, then how those are adults are behaving that way. So there is a chance for children can relearn about how to have more empathy, and maybe that's just the benefit of your focus, Greg, to how to expand this idea of empathy. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's look at a quote, a Mussar quote, which can maybe help us further this discussion a little bit. This is from Rabbi Shlomo Volbe, who was one of the great Mussar masters of the 20th century. So could someone please unmute and read this quote? This is talking again about Hitlamdut.
I can do it.
Great.
Okay. One who wants to work on oneself must understand well the depth of this matter and must agree and commit to the fundamental practice of Hitlamdut, self-reflective learning, from now and throughout one's life in all one's affairs, being only a learner until the day of death. Even when one reaches the time of death, they do not die, but learn how to die. This is the way of the practitioner of Mussar.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to copy this into the,
Let's
see. Um, into the chat here. So I'll be honest, this feels a little bit raw to me because we still are right in the middle of this. But maybe from right in the middle of this, our task is to learn how to be right in the middle of this. I don't know. So how do we, given this idea, does this apply or is this kind of too much? Maybe a couple days ago I had a couple things going on. It's like, I just need to get through the day. I'm not learning, I'm not in any kind of space to just kind of get, to learn and it's just I need to get through my day. So what do people think? Is there space for this? And if there is, what might it be? Toby.
I want to go back to the pandemic. When the pandemic hit in 2020, I was so destroyed by the whole idea of not being able to do the normal things that we do every day. It was, and I'd never had anything like that happen before. I mean, everybody has bad things happen to them, but nothing on that score. And quite frankly, I went through a real crisis of faith about what kind of a God would allow this sort of thing. I mean, and there were mass deaths. I mean, millions of people died. Kids were left parentless, and I mean that's an atrocity on the level of the Holocaust, as far as I'm concerned. And just irrespective of who you are and what you do and what precautions you've taken, and sometimes it doesn't matter what precautions you take. Sometimes you can't be prepared for some of this stuff. And I went through a whole thing about being angry and then grieving and the whole grief thing about what kind of a God could do this. And I really had trouble processing it. I discovered process theology along the way, and it really helped me to understand how things might occur. And it started to build the trust and the faith back. And maybe, I don't know if anybody else has lost faith in things at any period of their time, but I was always a believer in God until the pandemic. And then I just was, well, anyway, enough on that. Just curious as to what other people, if other people have gone through that, and if the fire situation is another one where you wonder what kind of a God would allow this to happen. Maybe there's an answer. I don't know.
Thank you, Toby. Martin.
Yeah, I guess I've never done this, and I guess I've heard of it where people, talking about blaming others. I mean, I wouldn't blame God. I mean, this is just, biology and viruses and, molecular mutations and things like that. So, I just, there might be a temptation to blame others, including blaming God, but it's anyway, just since we were talking about blaming others, so just a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Linda. And then Shelley, and then Marjorie.
There's a book that probably most of us know called When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Kushner. I read it a long time ago, and so I have to admit I don't really remember the content. I just know that it gave me some comfort to think in those terms.
Thank you, Linda. I mean, I will say that people have been having crises of faith forever. A great many of the Psalms have been like, don't abandon me, God. I'm going through a lot of stuff right now. Where are you? I need you right now. Shelley and then Marjorie. So if you can remember to unmute.
Yeah,
There
I
we
did it. Yeah, so I'm reflecting on all this because this is what we're supposed to be doing, self-reflecting on how it is affecting us. And And unfortunately, some things like these earthly, happenings, it's how do we handle it? What do we learn from it? What do we understand about our own divinity? What do we understand about our own fears? And I when I think back, when you think of all, the world and what's happened throughout life, it's, war begets war. And it's just like, it's like, I so want to put it out there, universe, like, come on, let's start getting good ones for the light people, and having all of us recognize that we're amazing people and that life should be amazing. And that when we do have terrible things happen to us, you know, to just take a pause for a moment, and yes, it's terrible and it's awful and all of those things, and people die and stuff, and then I think of the quote that where it said at the end that we learn how to die, and I thought to myself, that's the truth. We don't know how to die. We just assume is this way or that, but we don't, right? We may have had people die with us, but we're not going through the experience, we're just witnessing it. And so, really, in a sense, we're witnessing what's going on right now as well. And, I think also in that moment, it's the self reflection of how does witnessing what is occurring and, the chaos in the world and stuff, how does it affect us? Do we get caught up in fear? Do we get caught up in anger? And you know to truly be somebody who wants to help people and to have compassion. I always find this my hardest thing to overcome for people, because you know I feel for everything, but I'm not sure how to give it back to the person so that they have a moment of peace or a moment of grace.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelley. I think Marjorie, you had your hand up next. Is that right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Toby made a comment about something about not believing in God. I might be misquoting you, but and I was thinking that it's really, I mean, I think every individual in this group probably has their own view of what divinity is, and I respect that. And I was going to say, when you said that at first, I was like, really? And then I thought, no, you know what? You have that right, and we all are going to interpret our spiritual selves and our relationship with divinity differently. So I'm never lost, even people who ask God, where are you? Just acknowledging that they're asking, they still feel that there's something out there. So it's just thoughts, random thoughts. So that's all.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Wendy, you're up.
Well, I was just thinking back on this blame thing. I'm probably kind of stuck on it, but I was thinking this fire is big, huge. But I'm thinking when I walk down the street, if somebody comes up to me and they're hungry and they ask me if I can give them something to eat, I'm not sure the correct response is, well, of course you're hungry. You're not working. It's just like putting this blame thing. This does not make any sense. Also, with like studying Mussar, and all these people that are doing this aren't studying Mussar and aren't thinking about there's a time to be silent and then there's a time to talk about what made it happen and things like that. And I just think it's just one of those things that um, you have to look at that they just don't understand and the right time to talk, possibly.
I mean, we have in some ways, we have no more control over what other people do or say than we do over like the natural disasters. And so that's like part of the picture. Maybe that's part of our learning. Well, I can get more. I have no judgment about this. I'm just sort of musing, it's like, well, I'm going to get, really upset about the disaster. I'm going to get really upset about the people who are, not behaving correctly about the disaster or saying things that I believe are insensitive about the disaster. And that's kind of where we ask the questions. Why am I reacting that way? Karen, and then Michael.
Okay, I was thinking about when the bad things happen. And my way of getting through this and not losing faith is that as parents, our real job is to give our children tools to manage life, to appreciate the joys, and to cope with disasters. And sort of in a parental role, that's one of the ways that I can view God and the Torah is that there are all of these stories and guidance for traits that are in my toolbox that are accessible to help me manage living in the world. And the same way that a parent, sometimes even in the worst of circumstances for a child, can't fix it, can't make it better. They've given us the tools, hopefully, to be able to cope with it. And that's how I don't lose my faith, is that I don't feel like, I feel like God put the world in motion and we have free will and we have choice and bad things happen and sometimes horrendous things happen. And I guess I can't ask, I've never asked God to fix it or why is this happening, but I do use use the phrase in my own mind, please give me the strength to cope with this, to know how to help other people, to get through this, because that's just kind of how I see life on earth. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that or not, but that consistently helps me to not lose faith, even in the most difficult of times.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. We'll look at one more teaching. Oh, sorry, Michael.
I'm feeling in this moment like I want to practice the soul trait of silence because I don't have any appropriate words for all the grief that I'm hearing and taking in. But I also, in this moment, in all these moments, the first soul trait we're told to practice is humility. And I have a little piece of paper I keep in one of my pockets when I walk around that's written on it, I am but dust and ashes. And I am but dust and ashes. I can't fathom what the maker of the universe has in mind. I can't fathom the universe. I Far be it from me to question, not that I haven't, not that I don't feel compelled to, but far be it from me to do so. Instead, my job is to look around and see what my place is. And in the middle of the chaos that is Southern California right now, here much closer to my home in Williamsburg, the city of Richmond has no water right now because the storm that came through this past week knocked out the water purification system. So I spent most of the day making sure that there was some water for the people who needed it here. And that is not in any way, shape, or form an appropriate response to what's happening in the world at large or Southern California or anywhere else in the world, but it is what I could do from here. And that I think I understand that to be the practice of humility, is not more than my space, so don't ask my higher power for answers that I can't fathom, even if they were given to me, but not less than my place. So what can I do right here, right now?
Thank you so much, Michael. Bonnie.
So the Serenity Prayer, anyone who's been in a 12-step program knows the Serenity Prayer. And for me, watching it on TV, Nancy, I give you so much credit for being here with us today and not just pulling the jacket over your head, but being here. And I hope you feel the love that we're all sending to you and support. The Serenity Prayer for me gets me through some of these really difficult things. And I may say it over and over again, because it's something that I can do, because I can say the prayer. So just a thought.
Thank you. Beth.
Um, crises are very bad, especially as bad as they are right now in Los Angeles. And I really feel for you, Nancy. It's hard to lose a friend. Um, but I'm always encouraged by remembering that people turn to God when things are going wrong. When things are going right, they don't usually look for Him. There are a lot of people in our world who aren't looking for God and they need Him. And these things will make them, hopefully, some of them, look in the right direction.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, Nancy.
You know, I'm sitting here with such love, compassion, and gratitude, and I'm looking out my window, and I have to let that gratitude sink in because even though I'm looking out to a sky of red and smoke and ash all over everywhere, the God is within me. My divine spark is within me, and I go to God every night and every morning because it is only God working through me and the divine spirit when I sit still enough to hear that voice and that nudge of what to do. And that's what I believe in my faith. Um, but to hear all of you and all your comments, you know, I wasn't going to come today. And Spirit told me to be here. And I'm just so grateful to look out at the green and it's so dark here that the street lights are on. Um, but I have a house, I have love, I have friends, and I have the divine in me. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Well, I'm going to put up another teaching and we can either discuss it as a group or we could do some quick breakout groups. So first I want to put it up and we can take a look at it. Let me see if I can. Yeah. So sometimes Hitlamdut, cultivating a lens of openness and curiosity, is simple and inspiring. It is reawakening childlike wonder that brings joy and gratitude and a sense of belonging in this life. That is not my experience these days, given everything going on. Childlike wonder seems impossibly naive and perhaps even foolish. And yet, these days are exactly the context in which to bring the wisdom of Hitlamdut, that embodied, fully engaged curiosity. So the question that we could answer in breakout groups or just discuss here is, you know, maybe what are things that you're curious about? And of course, in a breakout group, you can talk about anything you want. So what are people feeling? If give kind of a thumbs up if you'd like to do the breakout groups or If not, we'll stay here. Any who would like to do the breakouts? All right, looks like we got one. But it looks like most people seem to be a little bit more on the page of just kind of staying together, which is fine for today. We would be a little bit rushed, I think, if we tried to get everything in. So I put the quote in the chat, I believe. Yeah, so what do we think? Is there a room for curiosity right now? Is there room for asking questions? And what are things that maybe you're curious about? Again, thinking about the internal world, or maybe it's the external world. Like Toby brought up, what about God? Where's God in all of this? This is a disaster. This is awful. Linda, you remember to unmute, please.
The main thing that comes up for me with curiosity is, what can I do? What can I do? Instead of just feeling bad and hiding, how can I participate in some small way to do some small thing for some small person? And also, I would be curious if people are writing in their notebooks, in their journals about their feelings, and it could be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. As I've been listening to people, I've been thinking about, what's going on with me. I've realized that, I feel very helpless, seeing what's going on and seeing what's happening to people I'm close with, or community that I've gotten to know through my school. And then like being helpless is really bad for me. Like I start to feel really, really down, and I start feeling helpless about everything. And that's, something that I need to journal about and think about. Because that is, I know this is going to sound stupid, but feeling helpless is the worst way to be helpful. There are ways, there are ways to help. And sending texts to my friends and donating money, um, and maybe there's something around here that I could do, because the world, yeah, as awful as things are in LA, it doesn't mean everything's okay here. It doesn't mean that people who have needs here don't have needs, and that those things have suddenly gone away. Who else? Sarah.
So I just wanted to respond that I am journaling these days, and also reaching out to people that I know in LA. But, like you said, Greg, there's stuff that's happening in one's own life here and now, all of us. We all have things that come up, but I like, the thought of how can we be helpful, and but I think that it's important to identify where we are and what we're feeling, and I find journaling really helps me with that, because otherwise it's just like the thoughts are racing around in my head like, a rat in a maze, and when I put it down on paper, I can write it down and say, wow, this is all happening, and even if I don't come up with a solution or conclusion, it's somehow good for me it kind of helps me to stand in my space, and somehow that's grounding. And then, I can maybe move on to how can I be helpful? What can I do? Because I know all of you are doing things that impact others in the community, helpful things, and also for me showing up today, you know, um, was important. And I think that that's how I feel like I can be helpful to myself and, to keep supporting this community that has been so wonderful for me, over the past few years. So thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so glad you were here. And yeah, if we all create this together, without all of us, we don't have any of this. Toby.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me, Greg, when you said helplessness. That is my reaction to a lot of this stuff. But I think the Hitlamdut part of it is to say, well, is that really true? Are you totally helpless? Is there something you can do? Is there one thing? Because I'm assuming that when you feel helpless, depression and sadness and other things follow, because it does for me. When I feel helpless, I feel despair. And that's not good for me, but it's not good for creating Hesed either. If you can do one nice thing for somebody else, that's a way of digging yourself out of that hole.
Yeah.
Well, my own, I'll speak for my own personal hole.
Right.
It's a way that I can help dig myself out of that hole of helplessness.
Yeah.
And it feeds on each other. When you do one nice thing, you think, oh, well, that felt really good. I think I'll do some more nice things. And you never know how you've helped somebody else just by being kind.
Thank you, Toby. Anyone else? Yeah, Marjorie.
There is a comment here. Let's see, in this this is not my experience. Everything childlike wonder seems impossibly naive and perhaps even foolish. I don't agree with that. I would love to. Last week I was with my nephews who are 3, 5, and 8, and it was so heartwarming and brought me to going to the Mall of America on rides. It was awesome. And two of the kids, I mentioned that my niece had to evacuate from Pasadena. She's with children that are at, how old is Harrison? Like maybe 7 months and 3. I would really be interested to know what the 3-year-old's point of view is in all this. Or do they even have the awareness? So my curiosity goes to a point of view of a child. What are kids thinking about this? And they seem to be, I don't think they overthink it as much as we do as adults. They're very much, there's the Hebrew phrase, hineni, I'm here. My experience with kids has been they're in the moment.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Yeah.
Beth.
I read a book about Mr. Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I like his philosophy. And he said that when he was a child, he would get upset when the sirens would go past if he and his mom were in the car, fire engines, whatever. He would get very upset at the noise. And his mother would tell him, look for the helpers. There's something bad happening, but look for the helpers. Look for the medics, the firemen, the policemen. We're going to go and help the people who have an emergency. And that soothed him. And it helps me when I see things happening. If I pass an accident on the highway, or I look at the fire on television in Los Angeles, and I think, there are helpers there. The fire department is there, and it calms me.
Thank you, Beth. I'm a huge Mr. Rogers fan. I was when I was very young, and there was a great Tom Hanks played Mr. Rogers in a movie a few years ago called "It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood," which I picked as my birthday movie because that was the only way I could get my kids to watch it because I wanted them to be exposed to Mr. Rogers. So yeah, it was uplifting. Thank you, Linda, and then Kaya.
I would encourage people to find a counselor, a therapist, a rabbi, somebody to go to talk to.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. So Kaya.
I guess I just want, there's no words. So the only words go to a blessing that I want to just share. And that is, may the blessing of God rest upon you. May God's peace abide in you. May God's blessings illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. And especially to Nancy where she's living. I just want to send to everyone here. May God be with you. May you be with God now and forevermore. And I have another meeting I need to go to. Mwah!
Thank you, Kaya.
Thank you, Haya.
Thank you, Chaya.
Bonnie, did I see your hand as well? No? Okay.
Get out of here.
Anyone else? Yes. We're getting to speed round time, so we'll have Wendy and then Shelley.
Well, since I said that thing about people blaming, but I want to go back and see that the children's reaction to our tragedy was just to come and hug us and give us pictures of Josiah, and they drew on, and so that was their childlike response. And then there were the other people who were not doing that. They were turning to God and saying, no, 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 no. And that's kind of where I am. It's no, 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 no. It's always okay. It's always okay to turn to Hashem and just say what you want. Like, no, 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 no. And it's who I turn to ask why.
Thank you, Wendy. Shelley.
I'm going to just say that I think this is when curiosity of your faith comes in to play. This is where you start actually asking and believing that you're going to be looked after and that everything will be okay. I've had many experiences in my life and I've had some amazing happenings where people were like, how can you still be so happy through what's going on? And I'm like, because I know God has my back and I know everything will be okay. And through it, instead of maybe having 6 months of suffering, I don't even call it suffering. 6 months of a learning episode, I only had to go through 1 month because after that, everything fell into place. So, there's that saying, this too shall pass, right? And, it's life is all about lessons and what we learn about ourselves.
Thank you, Shelley. All right, well, we're going to close today in a slightly different way. Instead of a closing meditation, I read in the J Weekly, the Jewish News of Northern California, there's a prayer that was written for the people of LA and we're asking for protection of the firefighters. So I'm going to share this, and I thought we could all read this together. This was by Rabbi Nicole Guzik, and I'll read it. You may unmute and read along, or you may keep yourself on mute and read along with me. So, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, protect those who are impacted by the devastating Southern California fires. Guide them towards shelter and safety. As family, friends, neighbors, and fellow Angelinos experience physical and emotional loss, may we turn towards each other with open homes and open hearts. One spread a blanket of security over the firefighters and first responders that serve our community. and strength and courage, that may each one come home safely, those they love. Let us be reminded of how to help one another. Holy One of blessing, give us increased compassion and an abundance of kindness, that we may extend our hands and hearts to those in need. As the prophet Elijah experienced, this great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by God's power. But God was not in the wind. After the wind and earthquake, God was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, fire, God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a small, still voice.
God's
Small, still voice runs through each of us. May God's voice compel us to reach out to each other, find pathways, hope, and ultimately peace for all in need. Amen. Well, friends, thank you so much for being together here today. I think it means a lot to me. It certainly means a lot to me, and it means a lot to all of us to be able to share these moments in community. And while we may not have answers to the big questions, being together is always part of the answer. Nancy, special love to you and to all who are impacted. And I will see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.